can understand how they feel disrespected. And that just motivated them into two significant wins, especially yesterday. Like, again, the Falcons game was significant because they held them to 10 points in the first half. They didn't score again in the second half, but they did score to 10. Now, what makes this game yesterday that much more better, that much more significant, is the fact that, again, underdogs, 3.5-point underdogs, mind you. The Minnesota Vikings fans traveled to Philly. They did that nonsense skull thing, whatever it is they call, on the steps of the art museum.
Right.
And if you go online and you look at that, it was an effort, but really wasn't much. I think what really got under the skin of the fans here and probably the team here was the fact that you dressed up the Rocky statue in a purple towel and a yellow and a gold scarf. So you pretty much defaced a Philadelphia icon at the art museum. And like I said, if you look at it, they're valiant effort, I'll call it. I can't even give them an A for effort because it was not all that great. Like I said, you can Google that and look at it because it was half-assed. It really didn't mean anything. But like I said, with you dressing up or defacing the Rocky statue, that really got under, that really struck a nerve with Eagles fans, and I'm sure it struck nerves with the organization, the city, especially the city. And hence, their shellacking of the visiting Minnesota Vikings, who, again, like I mentioned, they didn't really impress me. I did give them credit. They had a great season. Great season. Case Keenum played really good. Really good. But I also said that watching them, that I knew what the Eagles defense was capable of. I knew what any really good defense was capable of against Case Keenum. And I said that if you get to him enough, he's flappable. He'll throw a couple up, like he threw up one in the Saints game. And like I said, unfortunately, it didn't stick. They won that game by the grace of the football gods at the end. But if you get enough pressure on him, he'll throw it up to you. Perfect example. And they started out, they got the ball first. The Eagles deferred the kickoff. They started. They come down 75 yards, drive down, score a touchdown. Okay.
Do a good pass.
But the Eagles bucked down after that.
38 points, Hudson?
That tight end, Kyle Rudolph, that was his only catch.
They ain't talking about him the whole game.
He made one catch, that one touchdown.
Albeit
it was a touchdown. He's a Pro Bowler.
But he's a Pro Bowl caliber player.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. He
had one catch, that one touchdown, and that was it.
They took him out the game.
After that, the turning point, and shout out, kudos to Chris Long, who was a steal, a major steal in free agency for the Eagles this year, because he made plays in the Falcons game. He made plays yesterday, and it was his pressure.
That pick, that
on,
first pick.
His pressure on Case Keenum.
The first pick.
That got that first pick. That forced that first pick. That was returned for a pick six. And albeit I was watching the game with my uncle, my friends, and some folks, and people were always talking about how Ronald Darby's always 10 yards, that 10-yard cushion. But I have to give him some credit, because on that play, if you go back and you watch that play, when Patrick Robinson picks it off and he starts to go across field, Ronald Darby's not in the picture. And as you see, Patrick Robinson is pointing out blocks, he's orchestrating his blocks. Then all of a sudden, Ronald Darby comes into the picture and sacrifices his body. And throws a block. And I mean, albeit he didn't do very well with that block, but he sacrificed his body, got in the way enough
Yeah.
for Patrick Robinson to turn that
So I'm gonna
corner
take this to the house
and push to the end zone.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And that defense, again, we're going to talk about this Minnesota defense, this number one ranked overall defense.
Top 3. Top 5.
Let's see. Nick Foles. 26 of 33. 352 yards. 3 touchdowns. No interceptions.
Hell of a day.
Case Keenum, 271 yards. 1 TD.
Right.
2 interceptions.
Bad day.
Bad day.
Right.
And for Nick Foles to have the game that he had yesterday, and that game was on again at 4 something this morning because I just happened to wake up
and
turn the TV on, and it was on replayed again. I'm
good.
sure it will be replayed again later today.
Yes, it will.
But go back and watch that game. And I think Nick Foles shunned or quieted a lot of the naysayers with the way he played yesterday. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, oh, Nick Foles is now the greatest thing since sliced bread. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the same thing that I've been saying since Nick Foles took over as the starter. Right. And everybody tried to say, well, we got Nicky again. What is he going to do? You know, I'm putting my coaching hat back on again, albeit I coached a different sport, but nonetheless, it's still a coaching hat. The issue was, and what I told everybody was, now the onus is on Doug. Because now Doug has to adjust a little bit of his playbook to fit what Nick Foles can do and what Nick Foles cannot.
Even kill.
We all know Nick Foles is not the escape artist,
like Carson
so very mobile,
Aaron
that Aaron Rodgers or that Carson Wentz is.
Yes, sir.
But, like we said, Nick Foles won games in this league.
Yes, he did.
He got this team to the playoffs.
Yes, he did.
In this league.
Yeah.
So, he can play.
This is not a surprise. Everybody's surprised for nothing.
You know, everybody got scared, got nervous, saying, oh, we got to play with Nick Foles. Like, what is he going to do? And everybody forgets that there's still a coaching staff that has to do something. And all season long, Doug has been growing on me. Like I said, the jury was still out coming from last season into this season for me. The jury was still out. And I kept saying week to week, I kept saying, yeah, he's growing on me. I'm starting to like what he's doing. And he made it a point to do everything that we said here on this show yesterday that they needed to do to win. They ran the ball. They took shots downfield.
Flea flickers and all that. Yeah.
They had a couple trick plays to throw them off. But they tenderized that defense and they wore that defense down like you're supposed to do to a alleged ranked number one defense. You got to do everything you can to beat them down. And you know, the thing that people understand is, and what I said about the Eagles defense is that front 8, and I keep saying front 8, and people are probably wondering, why does he keep saying front 8? He only played 4 times. Yes, 4 down linemen, but they have 2 lines that they shuttle in and out. So I say front 8. Their front 8 is arguably the best in football.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The linebackers are pretty good.
They're real good.
And it's always been an Achilles heel for the Eagles with that secondary.
But
what I said to people was the secondary came together, I'm going to go on a limb and say, after that game 2 against Kansas City when they got their first loss. And they had been playing together for the entire season. And I've always said this defense is going to be what gets them into the playoffs. It's what's going to get them a win in the playoffs. Defense got them to the Super Bowl. And don't get me wrong, I'm not slighting the way Nick Foles played yesterday because he played a great game yesterday. So I'm not slighting that at all. But deep down inside, when you watch the game, you know it was that defense that did what they were supposed to do and then some to solidify that win. So shout outs, kudos to Jim Schwartz for calling the game that he called yesterday to enable them to do that. And they executed very, very well. And the one pass that Rodney McLeod dropped that should have been the 3rd interception, it's just pretty, that would have just been icing on the cake, you know. And again, like we just mentioned, Kyle Rudolph tight end who scored the only touchdown for Minnesota. All Pro Bowl tight end.
Right.
You didn't hear his game. You didn't hear his name at all.
They talk about him the rest of the game.
The rest of the game.
Right.
You talk about the #1 defense, the defensive lineman. I can't remember his name, but it's number 97. You didn't hear his name all game long.
Nope.
And people had been talking about Big V, Vitae. Say, oh, Vitae can't hold that
They
spot.
talk about him all week.
They've been talking about him all season. Ever
Right.
since Jason Peters went down and Vitae had to play.
Right.
Vitae stepped up. And that's another thing that people don't see a lot. They don't show it a lot, but you had Carson Wentz that went down. You had Jason Peters that went down. But these two guys, you could tell how this team bonded because Carson Wentz still in quarterbacks meetings, having suggestions, having input on the play calling, the play planning for the next game.
Right.
Jason Peters being at practice, tutoring, counseling, sticking right by Vitae's side, showing him and teaching him how to play that position and things that he can do to better himself on the field. You don't get that bond too often.
Right.
A lot of times, guys get hurt and they tend to stay away so they can recover.
Right.
Shows the bond that these guys have. And I'm going to let you chime in, Frank. The one last thing I want to say about it is Malcolm Jenkins, and I saw this video online that had a pregame speech before they came out. And I think it was, I don't know if it might have been the Falcons game or it might have been in the locker room after the Falcons game. And basically what he said was, this is what we came to do. We going to do our job. We all in this together. And if there's anybody in here that's not with that, you need to get out this locker room right now.
Voila. Let me chime in.
You don't get that.
I'm going to take a shout out to my cousin. I'm going to put him on blast. But long story short, I asked him, I was over at my other cousin's house, and he said, Nick Foles? He said, nah, we ain't get it done. Real quick though, D, I had Ricky could truly say, I had y'all going to the NFC Championship game. I didn't have y'all going to the Super Bowl, even with wins. But then it leaned on